Okay, so then let's, so then this brings us to the religion. So about religion, so actually a number of you brought up some issues that we'll talk about next week and, next week or in 2 weeks. There's some issues about actually religious people do bad things, right? Or religions do bad things and religious people do bad things. Or even that the that actually, like, we can have people like Jesus or Buddha, they're like post-conventional and they kind of broke through some kind of conventional forms of morality, but then actually then their religions created a new kind of conventional morality. And I'm going to talk about that in next week or the week after, actually specifically talk about that. So now I'm not, so the issue is about the bad things that religion does, or the things that religion does that's not aligned with, doesn't seem to be aligned with post-conventional or transcendental morality. Actually, I'm going to be addressing that. But for now, let me just talk about, in a sense, what I say is the, in a sense, one of the foundational dimensions about religion. So it's basically the idea that we have a human nature that is partly hidden, okay? And this nature is good. So we have this goodness of our hearts, but and that is who we truly are. And yet that is kind of covered up or hidden or repressed most of the time. So that's the idea of the uncarved block in Taoism, right? For example. So actually who we truly are is this kind of pure heart, which hasn't been carved up by society in all these different ways. In Christianity, so there's the idea that actually prior, in the time of Adam and Eve, in the Garden of Eden, but this can be understood spiritually, like not necessarily in the past, that so our true selves as human beings is divine, is pure. And at that time, we always know what is right. We know what is right and we do what is right. But then because of our sin, we fell into the world of everything right and wrong and all these, moral confusion, everything like that. So covering up our true nature. Or we have, so Mencius, talks about the goodness of human nature. Or in Buddhism, talks about our true nature, our Buddha nature, which is absolutely pure, has been covered up by the dukkha, the desires and everything like that. So actually, these different religions, they have different ways of talking about it, but they all have the same idea that really there is something in us that is hidden in us or that's covered up in us, which is morally good in a pure sense. So we have that pureness, that purity in us. So then the question is, then how do we release it? How do we release it? Most of the time we don't release it. So that's why we're acting in a selfish way most of the time or whatever. And so for the different religions, it's actually not that we should somehow train our morality, or in a sense, we should train our morality, but the way to train our morality is not by adding morality to what we are, but it's actually, we already are moral. We are moral beings. We always are, but we forgot about it. We don't know who we are. We don't know ourselves, and we are blocking ourselves, so to speak. So we have to clean off. We have to clean off what is dirtying our heart, so to speak, right? And from a religious point of view, actually, we can't really do it all alone. So that's where religious faith comes into the picture. You kind of, you need to connect to a higher power. And then that gives you this kind of energy or this power to clean yourself off. So this is in a sense, a common point that you would find expressed in different ways in different religions. So the idea that actually we are moral beings, but we've forgotten who we are, and that's what's leading us to be self-centered and everything like that. Now then, how do we combine this with but what we know about our biological reality, right, and everything like that? So that's why, the way I formulate it is that we have our animal nature. And our animal nature is actually neither moral nor immoral. Like an animal is just acting according to animal instincts. So you can't really say that an animal is good or evil or anything like that. Animals are just doing what they're supposed to be, what they do. Animals just do what they do. And there's nothing wrong with the way they act. So animals are self-centered almost all the time. And that's perfectly fine for animals because that's the way they are. That's the way they're genetically programmed, we could say. But for humans, we have something else. And this is what the religions say, we have that spiritual nature. And the spiritual nature is good. And so the question is, how do you release that spiritual nature? How do you become aware of it? How do you accept it? How do you become aware of it? How do you accept it? And then how do you follow it, right? So this is the question. So this is the questions that religions really pose. And so for a human to follow our animal nature is not right. So, or only partly right. So for an animal, just let them follow their animal nature because that's the way they are. But for a human, we have a moral sense. We actually know what is right and what is wrong. And because of that, we are responsible for our actions. We are, in a sense, we're accountable, right? We're responsible. And so we can't simply just follow our follow our pure self-interest all the time. So then we have to reflect. So what is my moral nature? How can I strengthen my moral nature? And how can I act morally in the world? And different people will act morally in different ways. So actually, sometimes when you see a struggle going on in society, what's actually interesting is that maybe on both sides of the struggle, they're very moral on both sides, right? They're both acting out of the goodness of their heart. So they have a different understanding of morality, but they're expressing their morality. And actually, I think that's the first thing that we have to know. Then you can start discussing rules and how, all this kind of thing. But before even thinking about that, I think the key issue, though, is how to be conscious of our moral sense and how to develop it and how to become aware of other people's moral sense. So that actually then you really appreciate it then when you see that somebody has different idea from yourself, is very even might, on some controversial issue, might have very different views. In a sense, you might be in a struggle with them, but somehow you can sense the goodness in their heart. And because you can sense the goodness in their heart and you have the goodness in your heart, somehow you can, I think for me, that's the beginning to resolving conflicts, is to appreciate how people are expressing their own goodness. And at the same time, none of us fully expresses our goodness. So then to appreciate that I am not, I want to be good, but I'm not good. I'm often not good, right? I'm not perfect. And so when I recognize my own imperfection, then I can understand and I can accept that other people are not perfect either, right? So when I understand the complexity of my own morality, that I have my higher, right, my spiritual nature that is good, but I have my lower nature that is, is drawing me into being indifferent or more self-interested. I know that. And I see that in others too. I see the goodness in their heart, but also their weaknesses that they have that I have. And I think then we can really start to, that's the foundation for a moral community, right? For seeing each other in our own moral complexity, to appreciate our moral goodness and to understand our moral weakness. And I think that's what I wanted to say about morality for now. All right. Any questions or comments?